They tried to decide her life, but they couldn't control her heart. Sold into a marriage she never wanted, she faced a future written by others, until one man gave her something she thought was gone forever: the right to choose. Your life changes the moment you choose it for yourself. On this channel, we share Western stories of love, resilience, motherhood, and human kindness. If this speaks to you, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. Thank you for being part of our community.
The whole world changed on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were for laundry and baking bread, a quiet routine she built after her mother passed. That simple peace was shattered by a telegram with just 11 words. Marriage arranged. William Carter, Montana. Leaves Friday. Signed, Father. She walked right into his study, something she had never done without even a knock. She found him there with a bottle of whiskey and a look on his face that told the whole sorry story. Her voice was steady, a lot steadier than she felt. How much? Her father, Thomas Hayes, looked up. For a second she saw the man who taught her to read, the man who promised her the world, but that man was gone. In his place was a stranger who had gambled away their future. Ellie, I can explain it. She cut him off. How much did you sell me for? The silence was heavy enough to break the floorboards. $12,000, he whispered. And the deed to the east pasture. She had to grab a chair to keep from falling. Just $12,000. He had lost more than that on a single hand of cards last month. Thomas reached for the whiskey again. He is a good man, Ellie. Respected. You will have everything. Everything but a choice, she thought. Her father flinched. The creditors were coming on Friday. They were going to take it all. I had no other way out. You could have told me. What could a woman do? I have a voice, she said, her calm finally breaking. I have a life that you just sold for a poker debt. That is not fair. Fair? She gave a sharp, bitter laugh. You want to talk about what is fair after you sold me like a horse to a stranger? He tried to reach for her, but she stepped away. She would leave on Friday. He had already arranged it all. Of course he had. As she left, she asked one last thing. Did you even try to find another way? His silence was all the answer she needed. She packed that night with just a single candle for light. She took only what was practical, leaving behind the girl who believed her father would always protect her. That girl was gone for good. On Thursday, the escort arrived. His name was William Porter, a quiet man with a weathered face. Mr. Monroe sent me to make sure you travel safely, Miss Hayes. He was polite, all business. The journey will take about 3 days. She had to ask him, her voice flat. Does he know? Does your boss know I was forced into this? A flicker of something crossed William's face. Ma'am, I do not get into Mr. Monroe's personal business. I just follow my orders. That night she thought about running. She had a little money, enough to disappear. But if she ran, her father would lose everything. The anger was a fire in her chest, but she could not bring herself to ruin him completely. So she stayed. Friday came, cold and gray. She dressed in a plain dark blue suit. She was not going to dress up for this. Her father met her at the door, looking like he had not slept in a week. Ellie, please. She pulled on her gloves. Do not apologize. It will only make this harder. I love you, he said, his voice breaking. She looked at him, really looked, and saw a man lost in his own mistakes. I know, she said softly. That is what makes this so much worse. At the station, she climbed onto the train without a single look back. As the town she knew slipped away, she felt nothing. It was like her heart had locked itself down to survive. The man named William was a quiet travel partner. He pointed out landmarks but did not push her to talk. On the second day, he finally spoke up. Mr. Monroe is a fair man, Miss Hayes. He is firm, but he is fair. He treats his people well." Margaret turned from the window. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "I suppose it is the truth, ma'am," he said, meeting her eyes. "I know this is not what you wanted, but believe me, it could be a lot worse." "Could it?" she asked, her voice full of bitterness. "I am being delivered to a stranger like a piece of mail. How could it possibly be worse?" "You could be going to a cruel man," William said, his voice low and serious. "I have worked for him for 8 years. I have never seen him raise his hand to anyone or break his word." "What a glowing recommendation," she said, turning back to the window. William said no more. By the 3rd day, the land had turned rough and beautiful, with mountains in the distance. They finally arrived in a dusty little town called Elhorn Creek as the sun went down. "This is it," William said, helping her down from the train. "We will stay at the boarding house tonight. Trunk. Mr. Monroe will be by in the morning. He wanted you to get a night's rest." "A rest before what?" "Before he claimed his property." Margaret did not ask. She just followed William down the dark street, too tired to even think straight. The boarding house was simple but clean. The owner, a Mrs. Chen, led her to a small room. Margaret barely kicked her boots off before she fell onto the bed, still in her traveling dress. That night she dreamed of her mother kneading bread, her hands so strong and sure. "Don't you forget who you are," her mother said, not even looking up. Margaret woke up to bright sunlight and the sound of horses. She forgot where she was for a second. Then it all came crashing back. She washed her face with cold water and put on her best dress. It was deep green with lace at the neck and cuffs. If she had to meet the man who bought her, she would do it with her head held high. William was waiting for her downstairs. He told her Mr. Monroe was at the church, just a little ways down the road. "The church?" Margaret let out a hollow little laugh. "Of course. Might as well make the deal official in God's house. Miss Hayes, please do not—" She stopped him gently. "I know you mean well, Mr. Porter, but nothing you say can fix this." That short walk to the church felt like a mile-long march to her doom. Each step took her closer to a future she never wanted. The church was a small, whitewashed building. It was not the wedding she had dreamed of as a girl. William opened the door, and Margaret stepped in. The place was empty except for 2 men by the altar. One was clearly the preacher. The other man was tall and broad. He wore dusty work clothes and did not even bother to take off his hat. He turned when she came in, and Margaret got her first good look at William Carter. He was not what she expected. She had pictured someone older with a mean streak. But this man was young, maybe in his early 30s. The sun and hard work had weathered his face, but it was not a cruel face. His eyes were serious and watched her so intently she wanted to look away. But she did not. She stared right back, letting him know she was not some scared little girl. A woman who did not want to be his. William's face did not change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. He took off his hat. It was a small thing, but it felt important. "Miss Hayes." His voice was deep and a little rough. "I am William Carter." "I know who you are," she said, her voice like ice. "Can we just get on with it?" The preacher cleared his throat. "Maybe we should talk about arrangements first. No need for that." Margaret walked right up to William. She was close enough to see the tiny gold flecks in his brown eyes and a thin scar on his jaw. "You bought me. My father sold me. All that is left is to sign the papers. So let's do it." "Miss Hayes." William's voice was even lower now. There was a warning in it. "We ought to talk first." "About what?" Her voice started to rise. "About how this is for the best? About how you will be good to me?" She laughed, but it sounded broken. "I do not need your promises, Mr. Monroe. I just need this to be over." The church was dead silent. The preacher looked like he would rather be anywhere else on earth. William just stood there, watching her with those steady eyes. He did not move. He did not speak. He just waited. Finally, he gave a slow nod. "All right, if that is what you want." "What I want does not matter anymore," she said, the words full of bitterness. That was decided the moment you paid for me. A look of anger, or maybe it was pain, crossed William's face. But it was gone in a flash. He turned to the preacher. "Let us begin." The ceremony was quick, and for that she was grateful. Margaret said her vows in a steady voice. She signed her name with a steady hand. She took the ring he put on her finger like it was just another business deal, which she guessed it was. "You may kiss the bride," the preacher said, sounding glad it was nearly done. Margaret's stomach twisted into a knot. This was it. The moment the man who owned her would take what he paid for. But William did not move. He just looked at her, his expression unreadable. "No," he said, his voice quiet. The preacher blinked. "I am sorry." I said, "No." William never took his eyes off Margaret's face. "She does not want to, so we are not doing it." Something inside Margaret's chest cracked. It felt a little like hope, but she was afraid to name it. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you are my wife now," William said plainly. "My wife, not my property, and I do not take what is not offered freely." His words just hung there in the quiet church. She looked deep into his eyes, searching for a trick, for a lie. But all she saw was a strange and honest man. "I do not understand," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I know." William turned to the preacher. "We are finished here." Then he looked back at her. "The wagon is outside. It is about an hour's ride to the ranch. I will get your trunk." He walked right past her and out the door. Margaret just stood there, her mind spinning. She had prepared herself for a monster. She had braced for a man who would treat her like a thing he had bought. Instead, she got respect. It made no sense at all. "Mrs. Monroe." It was William, his voice soft. "The wagon is waiting." Mrs. Monroe. The name felt like a coat that did not fit, but it was hers now. Margaret followed William out into the bright sunshine. The weight of her new life settled on her shoulders. The ride to the ranch was quiet. William kept his eyes on the road. Margaret sat beside him, trying to make sense of the man who bought her but refused to kiss her. He had called her his wife, not his property. What kind of man was he? The Monroe Ranch came into view, and it took her breath away. It was a huge place with big barns and corrals. Cattle were grazing as far as the eye could see. This was what $12,000 had bought. This was her price. William stopped the wagon in front of a large log house. It was a fine, strong-looking place with a wide porch. He set the brake and finally turned to face her. "I know what you are thinking," he said in a low voice. "You are thinking this changes nothing, that I am still the man who bought you. And you are right." Her throat felt tight. "Then why?" "Because I am also the man who has to live with you and work alongside you." He looked tired. "I did not do this to own you, Miss Hayes. I did this because I needed a wife and your father needed the money. Sometimes that is just how things are out here, and that is supposed to make it better." "No." His honesty was a sharp slap. "It is supposed to be the truth. I will not lie to you. But I will not treat you like property either. You are my wife, and that means you get my respect, even if you cannot love me." The word hung there between them, bare and lonely. A knot formed in Margaret's chest. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, her voice barely there. William just watched her, his gaze seeing far too much. "I will wait for your heart to decide," he said, his tone soft but final as the prairie horizon. "You have my name and my home. The rest is your choice." With that, he climbed down, leaving her with the weight of his words. He seemed to understand that owning a thing was not the same as earning it. Margaret forced herself to move, her boots hitting the dry Texas dirt. The large ranch house waited. Inside, it was not just warm, it felt like a true home. Worn furniture and muddy boots told a story of a life lived, not just a house for show. "Your room is upstairs," William's voice said from her left. Second door. Your trunk is already there. Margaret turned to see him leaning against a door frame, his expression unreadable. My room, she repeated. Not our room. Not unless you choose for it to be. The words should have been a comfort, but a strange disappointment pricked at her instead. And where do you sleep? She asked. End of the hall, my door stays closed. How considerate, she said with a sharp edge. Do all your business deals come with such kind terms, Mr. Monroe? His jaw tightened. If you want a fight, Mrs. Monroe, you have surely earned the right. But we can make this a living hell, or we can find a way to make it work. Make it work, Margaret laughed, a sound like shattering glass. You bought me from my father like a head of cattle. I paid your father's debts. William's voice stayed level, but there was steel in it now. I kept him from losing everything. I gave you a home. That does not erase what happened, she shot back. But it is not nothing either. You are right, Margaret said, her anger finally finding its mark. It is $12,000. That is my price. I do hope I am worth the investment. The word struck him hard. She saw it in the flicker of his eyes and the way his hands balled into fists. But he only turned away. Dinner is at 6. Do not be late. Her victory tasted like ash. Upstairs, her new room was beautiful, with a large handmade quilt on the bed. It was a beautiful cage. She sank onto the mattress, feeling the crushing weight of her new life. She was too full of rage to cry. A soft knock came at the door. An older woman with kind eyes entered, carrying a tray with tea and fresh bread. I am Martha. I keep the house. I thought you might want something after your trip. Thank you, Margaret said, surprised by the kindness. Martha tidied things that were already tidy. He is a good man, Mrs. Monroe. Mr. William is... Everyone keeps telling me that, Margaret said flatly. Fair enough, Martha said as she turned to leave. But you should ask yourself why a man who could have any woman in the territory paid $12,000 for one who hates his very guts. The question lingered in the quiet room. Why would a wealthy rancher need to buy a wife? Her mind raced through the possibilities. Was this all a clever act? A sudden argument from the yard below pulled her to the window. William was talking to 3 of his ranch hands. One of them, a thin man named Garrett, pointed a finger right at her window. William shoved him back hard. You speak about my wife again, Garrett, and you are finished here, William's voice carried clearly. Garrett just spat on the ground. Wife, that is rich. We all know what she is. Tell me, boss, was she worth the price? William's fist connected squarely with Garrett's jaw. The man went down hard, blood spilling from his mouth. The other men grabbed William's arms to hold him back. You are done, William said, his voice cold as a winter night. Be gone by nightfall. Margaret stepped away from the window, her hands shaking. He had fought for her. The violence should have confirmed her worst fears. Instead, it stirred something warm and confusing deep inside her. By 6 o'clock, she had composed herself for dinner. She found William in the dining room, a cloth wrapped around his knuckles. You are hurt, she said without thinking. It is nothing. I saw what happened with Garrett. His face became a careful blank slate. You should not have had to see that. Why did you do it? She asked. You know why. I want to hear you say it. The silence stretched out between them. Because he disrespected you, William said at last. You are my wife, and that means something, even if you wish it did not. So it was about your pride, she accused, about your property being insulted. No, the word was sharp. It was about you. You are a person who deserves to be treated with dignity. You can hate me. You have that right. But do not twist my actions into something ugly just to make me a monster. His words stung because they were true. I do not know what to do with you, she admitted. You bought me, but you treat me as if I matter. You do matter, he said, pulling out her chair. Now please, sit. Martha's food is getting cold. A meal she had eaten in a long time. They ate without a word for a while, just the sound of forks on plates. Why did you do it? Margaret finally asked. Martha said you could have any woman you wanted. So why buy one who despises you? William put down his fork. You want the honest truth? I want something that makes a lick of sense. All right. He leaned back, and she saw how truly tired he was. I am 32 years old. I built this ranch from dirt. I have worked every single day since I was 14. 3 years ago, I tried to get a loan to buy more land for the herd. Every bank said no. Why? Because I am not a married man. William's laugh was bitter. The banks figure a single man is a bad bet. They think he will drink or gamble the money away. But a family man, he is responsible. He is safe. It started to click into place. So you needed a wife for a bank loan. I needed a wife to survive. His words were brutally honest. This ranch is my whole world. Without more land, I will lose it in 2 years. The herd is already too big for the pasture I have. Model. I need more land, more help, and a whole lot more money. I need a bank that'll take a gamble on me. A wife is how you look respectable. He looked her square in the eye. I tried the proper way. Called on 3 women this past year. Every one of them turned me down. Folks talk. They say I am too hard, too set on my work. They might be right. Margaret took it all in. This was not about wanting a wife. This was about survival. So, when my father came to you, you saw a chance. I saw a way out for both of us, William said softly. Your father keeps his place. You get a roof over your head. I get the wife I need to save this ranch. Nobody gets out of this clean, but we all get out. Do not call me that. The words were sharp. Mrs. Monroe. It just sounds wrong. What do I call you? Margaret. She said it like a challenge. If we are stuck in this mess together, you will use my name. Something in his face changed, maybe surprise. Margaret, he said, and the name sounded different coming from him. Warmer. Call me William. We are past all that. They ate the rest of their dinner quiet-like. It was a thinking quiet, not an angry one. When Martha cleared the plates, she gave Margaret a look that seemed like hope. I believe I will turn in, Margaret said, getting to her feet. Wait. William stood up too. There is something else. The bank meeting is Thursday. They will want to meet you, to make sure this marriage is the real deal. The real deal? The words tasted bitter. You mean to make sure you did not just hire some woman to play the part? Something like that. And what if I tell them you bought me? The question flew out before she could stop it. That this is just business. William stood, bone still. Then I lose everything, the loan, the ranch, all of it. And you, he paused, you will have no home and a husband in name only. Your father loses his house. We all lose. He was backing her into a corner, and she knew it, but he was also telling the truth. If she ruined him, she ruined herself right along with him. I will not lie for you, Margaret said. But I will not offer up the truth either, as long as you keep your end of the bargain. Thank you. The relief in his voice was plain as day. I know that was not easy. You have no idea what it cost me, she said, turning for the stairs. Good night, William. Margaret. His voice stopped her. I meant what I said. I will wait for you, however long it takes. She did not answer. She went to her room and leaned against the closed door. Her heart was beating a wild rhythm in her chest. The man had bought her. That was a hard, cold fact. But he had also been honest and given her respect when he could have demanded she obey. What was a woman to do with a man like that? She could hear him moving in his own room down the hall, so close. Yet he was keeping his word, keeping his distance. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to sort through the tangle in her mind. She had come here expecting to find a monster, but instead she found a man just as trapped as she was, fighting the only way he knew how. It did not make it right, but it made him human. And a human is a lot harder to hate than a monster is. She climbed into that big bed and pulled the quilt to her chin. Moonlight crawled across the floorboards. Tomorrow she would have to face the ranch hands and their curious looks. Tomorrow she would have to start a life she never asked for. But tonight, she let a terrifying thought creep in. Maybe she had not been sold to the worst man in the world after all, and that scared her more than any monster could. Because if he was not a monster, she might have to let go of the anger that was holding her together. Morning came too soon, with roosters crowing and men shouting in the yard. Margaret dressed in a simple work dress and braided her hair. She had survived the trip. She had survived the wedding. She could survive breakfast. The kitchen was empty, but coffee was warm on the stove. A note from Martha said she had gone to town for supplies. Margaret poured a cup and watched the ranch wake up. Men moved with purpose, saddling horses. Buildings. Horses were being saddled. And somewhere in the organized chaos, William was probably already working. The man seemed incapable of rest. "You are up early?" His voice made her jump. She turned. He stood in the doorway, dusty, with a smear of blood on his shirt sleeve. What happened? The question was out before she could think. It was just a calf tangled in some wire. William went to the sink to wash up. "It is not serious. These things always look worse than they are. You ought to change that shirt." He glanced at her, a hint of a smile in his eyes. "I did not take you for the type to worry over laundry." "I am not." She put her cup down a little too hard. "I just do not want Martha thinking I let my husband walk around looking like he lost a fight." The word hung in the air between them. Husband. She had said it. William dried his hands slowly. "Margaret, about yesterday, I need you to know Mr. Monroe." A man ran through the back door, out of breath. "We got trouble. Someone cut the fence down south. We are missing at least 50 head. William stiffened, his whole manner changing. "How many have we found? Maybe 20? The rest scattered deep in the canyon." The man looked at Margaret, then quickly away. "Could be rustlers. Could be a grudge." "Get every man we have out there," William ordered, grabbing his hat. "I want those cattle back by dark." He stopped and looked back at her. "I am sorry. I have to go." "I will be fine," she said, and her voice was surprisingly steady. He looked torn for a moment, then he was gone. The house felt strangely empty without him, and she did not like that feeling one bit. She found herself in his study. Books lined the walls. A desk by the window was covered in papers. She knew she should not look, but she could not help herself. She ran her fingers over the ledgers. The story they told was one William had not. The ranch was bleeding money. It was drowning in debt. Month. Just pages of failed loans from 4 different banks. Then William's neat script. Hayes arrangement, $12,000, last chance. Her hand trembled. He was not kidding. This place was bleeding out, and that loan was the only thing that could save it, and save everything William had built. "You ought not be in here." Martha's voice was firm, but not mean. "This is my business now, is it not?" Margaret turned to face her. "I am his wife. Does that not give me the right?" Martha's face softened some. "You are angry, and you have a right to be. But that man is fighting for his life, Mrs. Monroe. Maybe show him a little grace." "Grace?" Margaret let out a humorless laugh. "He bought me. How much grace does a man like that deserve? Ask yourself what you would have done," Martha said, stepping into the room. "If everything you had was slipping away, would you take the one chance you had to save it, even if it made you feel like dirt?" The question landed hard. What would she have done? With that kind of power and that kind of choice, would she really be any different? "I do not know," she whispered. "Well," Martha said gently, "maybe that is a start." The afternoon crawled by with no sign of William. Margaret tried to busy her mind, but she kept picturing the worst. This country could be cruel. It was near sunset when she heard the thunder of hooves in the yard. She ran to the window, her heart pounding, and found him among the riders. He looked tired and angry. When he headed for the house, her relief was so sharp it felt like a pain in her chest. He found her in the kitchen. We found the cattle, he said, his voice flat. Most of them. Lost about 15 head down the canyon. And the fence? She asked, surprised she even cared. Cut clean. It was not an accident. William pulled his gloves off, his hands tight. Somebody wanted them loose. Somebody wanted to hurt us. Who? I have a good idea. He looked right at her. Garrett, the man I fired. He knows every weak spot on this place. Her stomach sank. Because of me. You defended me and he did this. He did this because he is a spiteful... William stopped himself, swallowing his anger. This is not on you, Margaret. Garrett has been trouble for a while. I should have let him go sooner, but you did not. Now you have lost money because you stood up for me. The guilt was a heavy weight. Maybe I should... Do not. William's voice was hard as iron. Do not you dare blame yourself. Garrett made his choice. Now he will pay for it. And how will he pay, she asked. What will you do? What I should have done from the start. I am riding to town tomorrow to see the sheriff. And if the sheriff cannot help? The fear in her own voice scared her. His silence was the only answer she needed. Out here, justice was something you made for yourself. The law was far away and did not always listen. I will not let him hurt you, William said quietly. Or this ranch, whatever it takes. That promise should have been a comfort. Instead, it was terrifying. Whatever it takes could mean anything. It could get him killed over a woman he bought. Thursday, Margaret said suddenly. The bank meeting is in 2 days. William nodded. We will have to leave at dawn. It is a full day's ride. What do they need from me? What should I say? William looked exhausted. Just be you. Answer them honestly. They just want to know we are really married, that this is not some kind of trick. As long as we look like we are together on this, it will be fine. A united front. Like they were partners instead of 2 strangers in a business deal. But maybe, she thought, that is what they had to become to survive. All right, she said, I will do my best. Something in his face changed. Gratitude, maybe. Thank you. I know this is not what you wanted. I did not want any of this, she said, though it came out softer than she meant. But I am here. We might as well see it through. That night, Margaret lay awake, listening to the house settle. She thought of Garrett somewhere out there, angry and wanting revenge. She thought of the bank and the part she would have to play. She thought of William down the hall, carrying a weight that might be too heavy even for his broad shoulders. And then she realized that sometime in the last day, she had started thinking of it as the ranch. Not his ranch, as if a part of her was tied to its survival now. Wednesday morning was cold and gray. Margaret dressed in a practical riding skirt. If she was going to be a rancher's wife, she might as well look like one. William was already gone. Martha had breakfast on the table. He left before the sun was up, Martha said, pouring coffee. Checking the other fence lines. Is it always like this, Margaret asked? The constant worry, the work that never ends. Ranch life is not for the faint of heart, Martha said. But Mr. William, he is harder on himself than anyone, always has been. Why? The question had been nagging at her since she saw that ledger. Martha was quiet for a long time. His father, she finally said, built this place from nothing, worked himself into an early grave doing it. William was just 17 when he passed. It left him with a half-finished dream and a mountain of debt. It all started to make sense. He had been fighting his whole life, fighting to hold on to what his father started. Martha's voice was full of sadness. That is why this loan is so important. It is not just about the ranch. It is about proving his father's work was not for nothing. The truth of it settled on Margaret like a stone. William was not just saving a business. He was honoring his father. And she was his last, desperate bet. She found him in the barn a little later, getting their gear ready for the ride. He looked up, surprised to see her. You should not be out here. It is about to rain. I had to talk to you, she said, stepping closer. About tomorrow. Martha told me about your father. A wall went up in his eyes. She had no right. I was trying to understand. Margaret said, "to understand why you did it." "Does it matter?" he asked, his voice rough. "Knowing my reasons? I do not know." She was tired of pretending to know anything. "But I will not ruin you tomorrow at the bank. Whatever I feel about this, I am not cruel enough to destroy a man's life over it." William just stared at her. "Why?" "Because Martha was right. If I were in your shoes, I might have done the same thing." The words were hard to say, but they were true. "I am angry with my father. I am angry with you. But I am starting to see that folks sometimes do wrong because the other choices are even worse. That does not make it right." "No," she met his gaze. "But it makes it human, and I would rather be tied to a flawed man than a perfect monster." The barn was quiet as rain started to fall. William took a step toward her, then stopped, remembering his promise. The space between them felt huge and fragile all at once. "I will wait for you," he said again. "But Margaret, I need you to know if that day never comes. If you cannot forgive this, I will still honor my word." He promised her a place to call home, his protection, and his respect. It was not love, but it was total acceptance, and it broke down her final wall. She agreed they would face the bank tomorrow. As the first rains of a storm began to fall, they both knew that somewhere out there, Garrett was waiting and planning his revenge. They stood together, wondering if they could survive what was coming. They set out before the sun came up. The air was cool and smelled of wet sage. Margaret sat straight in her saddle, trying to hide that she had not ridden this far in years. William was calm and focused, outlining their route. He was a man with a will of pure iron, and he would not fail. Too much was riding on this day. They rode on in silence as the morning broke. She finally broke the quiet by admitting she knew almost nothing about him. He told her he drank his coffee black and did not have a favorite color. It never seemed important. The real question hung in the air. Were they actually building a life together? Before he could say a word, she told him her favorite color was the deep blue of the sky right after sunset. "I hate thunderstorms," she confessed, her voice tight. "They take me back to the night Mama died." She ran into the barn to save the horses from a lightning fire. She never came back out. William was quiet for a long time. "I am sorry," he said, his voice low. "That is a heavy thing for a child to see." "I was 12, she said. "Old enough to know what death was, but young enough to blame myself." Her father fell to pieces after that, chasing his sorrow with whiskey and cards. William finally understood. "So when he sold you, it was the last straw." Her hands gripped the reins. "I know what desperation does to a man. That is why I am trying to understand you." "It does not make it right," William said. "No," she agreed, "but it is a start." They stopped at a small creek. William helped her down, and for a second they stood so close she forgot to breathe. Then he stepped away. As they ate, William broke the silence. "We need to talk about the bank, get our story straight." "You mean get our lies straight," she shot back. "It is not a lie if we are married," he insisted. "This is not real, William. It is a business deal." "Then make it real," he said, his voice full of fire. "Make it real so I do not have to feel like the lowest man on earth every time I look at you." Margaret was stunned. "I cannot do that." "I am not asking for love," he said, his jaw tight. "I am asking you to try, to give us a real chance." "And if I cannot?" she whispered. "Then at least we will know we tried," he said, standing up suddenly. He was right. They could spend their lives in bitterness, or they could try to build something new. The ride to town was quiet, but it was a hopeful kind of silence. Margaret practiced her answers in her head. How they met. How long they had known each other. But when she got to "Do you love him?" her mind went blank. As they rode into town, William reminded her, "We are newlyweds. It is fine to be a little awkward." "That part will not be hard to act," she muttered. He almost laughed. At the brick bank, William helped her from her horse. His hands rested on her waist for a moment, and this time she did not move away. They had to look like a real couple. Inside, they met two men. The older one, Walter Brennan, looked like he had not smiled in years. The younger one, James Whitmore, had the sharp eyes of a hawk. After introductions, Brennan got right to it. "Mr. Monroe, you are asking for $25,000. That is a lot of money." "The ranch can handle it," William said, his voice steady. "My records show steady profits. With more land and cattle, I can triple my business." Whitmore chimed in, his voice like cracking ice. "Banks do not bet on what-ifs, Mr. Monroe. We need guarantees. That is why your marriage matters." William tensed. "My marriage has nothing to do with my ranch." "It has everything to do with it," Brennan said. "A married man has roots. He pays his debts." Anger rose in William's voice. "I have never run from anything." Margaret took his hand, surprising them both. "My husband's commitment to the ranch is solid. Our marriage just proves it." Brennan's eyes narrowed. "And how did you two meet?" "The first test." She felt William's grip tighten. "Through my father's business," she said calmly, telling a careful piece of the truth. Whitmore scoffed. "How long did you court?" "Does it matter?" Margaret challenged. "We are married and ready to build a life." Brennan leaned in. "We want to see that this marriage is real. Not that you are some actress he hired." The accusation was like a slap. A hot rage filled Margaret. "I am not an actress," she said, her voice like ice. "I am a woman who did what she had to do to survive." She pulled off her glove and slammed her hand on the desk, showing the simple gold band. "Here is your proof. We said our vows in a church. What more do you need?" All the fear and anger of the past few days came spilling out. "You sit in your fine office and judge us? You know nothing about what it takes to make a life out here." She stood, pulling William with her. "We are finished. Keep your money." As she reached the door, Brennan's voice stopped her. "Mrs. Monroe, wait." She turned. Brennan was actually smiling. "That," he said, "is the kind of fire a rancher's wife needs. Prepare the loan papers, James." Whitmore was speechless. "But, sir—" "I have seen enough," Brennan said, shaking Margaret's hand. "No one can fake that kind of loyalty. The loan is approved." The words hung in the air. William jumped to his feet and shook the banker's hand, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. You will not regret this." Outside in the sun, Margaret felt her knees go weak. They had done it. The ranch was safe. It took a performance that felt all too real. "Margaret," William began, his voice shaky. "What you did—" "Do not," she cut in, not ready to talk about it. "I was just angry." "You defended me," he said, his voice full of surprise and gratitude. She corrected him, saying she defended them. As his hand gently touched her face, a nasty voice cut through the air. It was Garrett, spitting insults from across the street. In a blink, William had the man pinned against a wall, his own voice now cold and dangerous. Garrett's men went for their guns, but William's voice cut through the tension. "Draw on me and you will hang," he spoke with a chilling calm. "Eleanor, get back inside the bank." She was frozen, watching William's hands tighten on Garrett's throat. The man's face went from red to a deep purple. William's eyes were cold steel, promising he could end this man right now without a second thought. "William, don't," she pleaded, her voice surprisingly steady. "He is not worth it. He insulted you." William's grip held fast. "If you kill him, they will take you. The loan, the ranch, everything we worked for will be lost." She laid a hand on his arm. "Please let him go." After a long moment, William released him. Garrett fell to the dirt, gasping for air. "You are finished in this town," William stated. "Every rancher will hear about what you did. You will find no work, no help. You are done." Garrett staggered up, his eyes full of hate. "This is not over, Monroe." William simply said, "Yes, it is. Yes, it..." He took Eleanor's arm and led her away, his touch gentle despite the anger still simmering inside him. Behind them, Garrett's curses were lost in the street noise. But Eleanor knew men like him never let go. They found a boarding house, and William secured 2 separate rooms without a word needing to be said. The gesture showed her a deep respect she appreciated. "Get some rest," he said at her door. "We sign the papers in the morning and ride out." Eleanor stopped him before he left. "William, thank you for standing up for me, for being a man of your word." A flicker of warmth crossed his face. "I will wait for your heart to decide, Eleanor, no matter how long it takes." He left her standing there, her thoughts in a complete tangle. Something had shifted between them today. She had defended him, touched him, and felt real terror at the thought of him being harmed. These were not the feelings of a woman for her enemy. But it was not exactly love, either. It was something new, something that was both frightening and full of promise. Eleanor looked out the window as the sun set, painting the sky in the very shade of blue she had told William was her favorite. She wondered if a heart could choose what the mind believed was impossible. Could love truly grow from a business deal and a purchased vow? For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope that it could. The thought was both terrifying and exciting. Sleep did not come easy that night. Her mind was a battlefield of images. She saw William's raw fury, but also the gentle way he looked at her afterward, as if she was his only anchor in the world. She remembered his promise to wait for her no matter what. She rose before the sun and dressed by candlelight. Today they would secure the ranch's future. They would go home. The word surprised her. When did the Monroe Ranch start to feel like home? William was already in the lobby, looking just as tired as she felt. But she saw a new determination in his eyes. He stood as she approached, a simple act of courtesy that made her heart flutter. "Ready?" he asked. "As I will ever be." They walked toward the bank through the crisp morning air. The town was just waking up, the streets quiet and peaceful. The paperwork at the bank was finished in less than an hour. Brennan explained the terms, and Eleanor watched William sign his name, his hand shaking just a little. When Brennan handed him the bank draft, a wave of pure relief washed over William's face. This was more than money. It was proof that his father's hard work had not been for nothing. "Congratulations, Mr. Monroe," Brennan said with a firm handshake. "Use it well." "I will," William promised, his voice thick with emotion. "You have my word." Back in the sunlight, William stared at the draft as if it were a dream. Eleanor touched his arm gently. "We did it," he whispered, his eyes finding hers. "You did it," she said softly. "I only played a part." "No." He took her hand in both of his. "You are the one who saved us. When you stood up for me, for us, that is what convinced them. That is what made all the difference." "What is us, William?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "What do we truly have?" He started to answer, but his eyes darted to a figure across the street. His face hardened. "Get behind me." It was Garrett, standing alone in an alley. His hand hovered over his pistol, his eyes wild with the fury of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Congratulations on your loan," Garrett yelled across the empty street. "That was quite a show you two put on. I almost believed it." "Just walk away, Garrett," William warned, shielding Eleanor with his body. "This does not have to end this way." "End?" Garrett let out a harsh laugh. "This is the beginning. You ruined me, Monroe. You took my job, my name. Now I am going to take something from you." His hand shot for his gun. William pushed Eleanor back, drawing his own weapon. A single gunshot echoed through the morning. Eleanor screamed, bracing for the worst, certain that this was the moment she would lose him, just as she was starting to find him. But William was still on his feet. Garrett was down, clutching a wounded shoulder. 3 feet away, his pistol lay in the dust. The sheriff stood behind him, his rifle still smoking. "That is enough trouble for one day. Garrett, you are under arrest for attempted murder." The next few moments were a blur of activity as the sheriff took statements and a doctor was called. People gathered, drawn by the shot. William held Eleanor close, and she leaned into him, finding strength in his embrace. "You all should head on home," the sheriff advised them. "We will need you back for the trial, but Garrett will be spending some quality time in a jail cell." "Thank you," William said, shaking the sheriff's hand. "You stepped in at the right time." "Just doing my job," the sheriff replied with a tip of his hat. "Safe travels, ma'am." They collected their horses, both still trembling. William had to help her mount, his hands steady and sure. As they rode away from Elkhorn Creek, she kept glancing back, but the road was empty. About an hour from town, her composure finally broke. "You could have been killed." Her voice cracked with all the fear she had held inside. "It would have been my fault. Because you defended me, you made an enemy of him. If the sheriff had not been there—" "Margaret," William began. He pulled his horse up and she stopped right beside him. "Look at me." When she did, the look in his eyes caught her breath. "I'd do it all again," he said flatly. "Every last bit, even knowing how it ends. Some things are just worth the fight." He paused, struggling for the words. "You are one of those things." "Why?" she whispered. "All I have been is angry and difficult. Why would you do that for me?" "Because you are real," William answered right away. "You never faked it. You were mad and you showed it. You were hurt and you let me see it. That is more honest than anything I have known for years." Tears burned her eyes. "I do not know how to do this, William. I cannot go from hating you to this." "Then do not," he said, nudging his horse closer. "Do not try to make that leap. Just get from today to tomorrow. Small steps, Margaret. That is all I ask." His hand found hers. "And if you still cannot, we will figure it out. But I think you are closer than you know." They rode on, his words turning over in her mind. In the bank yesterday, she had defended him without a second thought. She felt real fear when Garrett reached for his gun. And she had leaned into William's arms like it was where she belonged. Those were not the actions of a woman holding on to hate. As they rode, she realized she was thinking of the ranch as home now. Their home. When did that happen? Was it in the barn or at the bank? Or did her defenses just slowly crumble away without her even noticing? They stopped at Miller's Creek for lunch. The silence this time was comfortable. He shared his food and she poured the coffee. They felt like small steps toward being a real couple. "Tell me about your father," Margaret said suddenly. "What was he like as a person?" William was quiet for a long moment. "Stubborn, hard to please, always demanding more. I spent my whole life just trying to get one good word from him." "Did you ever?" "Once," William said, his voice distant. "I was 15. Broke a wild stallion no one else could handle. Took me 2 weeks and a mess of bruises. When I finally rode him in, my father just looked at me and said, 'Good work, son. You'll do.' That was it. 3 words. But I held on to them for years." Margaret's heart hurt for that boy. "Is that why you work so hard, still trying to prove something to him?" "Maybe," William met her gaze. "Or maybe I am trying to prove to myself that I was worth his sacrifice." "You were," Margaret said, sure of it. "You took what he built and made it better. This ranch is thriving because you refused to quit when things got hard." "Do you really think so?" "I do." And she knew she meant it. This man had bought her, trapped her. But he had also shown her more honor than anyone. He kept his word and fought for her. Maybe that was worth everything. They got to the ranch as the sun went down, painting the sky blue. Martha was on the porch, a big smile on her face. "Well," she called out, "am I still employed?" "We got the loan," William said, swinging down from his horse. "The ranch is safe." Martha let out a whoop and rushed to hug them both. "I knew y'all could do it. I have dinner waiting." But before they could go inside, William Porter came from the barn, looking grim. "Boss, we have a problem." William tensed up immediately. "What is it?" "Someone hit the north pasture last night, cut the fences, scattered the herd, and set fire to the hay barn. We lost the whole season's supply." Margaret felt William go still. How bad is it? Bad. We will need to buy feed for the winter. Maybe $10,000–15,000 worth, William said, his voice low. I am sorry, boss. They must have come in from the canyon side. The loan money. Nearly all of it would be gone just fixing this, with nothing left for what was meant to save them. Margaret saw the realization hit William's face, a look of a man used to getting knocked down. Garrett, she said softly. This feels like his work. Garrett's in jail, William said, but he did not sound convinced. Unless he set this up before he tried to shoot you. Yes, Margaret's mind raced. He knew we would be gone. He had time to get someone else to do it. We will never be able to prove it was him. William's hands balled into fists. He wins. Even from a jail cell, he wins. No, Margaret said, her own voice surprising her with its strength. He does not win. We still have the loan. We still have us. We will figure this out. She grabbed his arms, making him look at her. Your father built this from dirt. You have kept it going through hell. This is just one more fight. We will survive it. We, William whispered. You keep saying we. Her hands were still on his arms, and she could feel him shaking with rage or exhaustion. Yes, we. Because I am your wife, William Carter. That means I fight when you fight, and I stand with you when the world tries to tear you down. Something in his face broke, and his arms went around her, holding on tight. Margaret held him back, feeling his heart pound as he finally let himself lean on someone. I cannot do this alone anymore, he admitted. I am so tired of being alone. His words were muffled in her hair. You are not alone, she said, pulling back to look him in the eye. Not anymore. Then, without a thought, she reached up and kissed him. It was not a hesitant kiss. It was the kiss of two people who had been through a storm together and were still standing. He froze for a second, then kissed her back with a need that buckled her knees. His hands held her face, so gentle. Something inside her just clicked into place. When they finally pulled apart for air, he rested his forehead on hers. Your heart, he whispered. Did it finally choose? It has been choosing for a while now, she confessed. I was just too stubborn to listen. A real laugh escaped his chest, the best sound she had ever heard from him. God, Margaret, you are going to drive me crazy. Probably, she smiled against his lips. But you will never be bored. Boss, William's voice cut in. Sorry, but we need to make some decisions on the feed. William sighed, but did not let her go. Give me 5 minutes. Take 10, William said, a smile in his voice. Take 20, we will handle it. With Garrett finally in jail, they stood together on the ranch. The loan money would be tight and the fire damage was severe. But they would handle it. Margaret took his hand in hers. Tomorrow they would figure it all out. Tonight, they were simply grateful to be alive. They were a team now, choosing to be a family every single day. The following weeks were hard. They stretched every dollar from the loan and worked from dawn until dusk. She learned to run the business side of the ranch, and he learned to depend on her. Garrett was sentenced to 5 years in prison for his crimes. When the first snow fell, Margaret watched William from the porch, amazed at her new life. She was no longer a prisoner of her past, but a woman who was finally free. I reckon I was awful when you got here, Margaret said with a small smile. You had every right to be, Martha's voice was kind. But you were brave enough to change your mind. He makes that part easy. Margaret watched William with a gentle mare. He was the man she never knew she needed. That Christmas, William gave her a surprise. It was a fine leather journal. For your writing, he said, almost shy. Martha said you used to keep one. Margaret held it like a treasure, her throat tight. She hadn't written a word since her mother passed. But seeing the hope in his eyes, she wanted to try. It's perfect, she whispered. That night she wrote for the first time in ages. I'm not afraid anymore. Not of the future or my own heart. I love the man who bought me. But William didn't just buy a wife, he earned a partner. And I chose this life. Together, we are building something that is truly ours. Something no one can ever take from us. This ranch, this marriage, this love. We fought for it, and we will keep on fighting for it. That is what real love looks like. When spring came, so did new life, and the ranch began to heal. The loan payments were steady. Margaret even hired 2 new hands and sealed a good deal with a Denver supplier, raising their profits by 15%. One evening, William took her hand. "I need to tell you something." Margaret's heart jumped. "What is it?" "I love you," he said, his voice sure. "I know I said I'd wait, but my heart is not waiting anymore. You are mine, and I am yours. I love you more than I ever thought possible." Tears streamed down her face. "I love you too. I think I have for a long time." "Then don't be scared," he said, pulling her close. She fit right in his arms. This was where she belonged. "I'm not," Margaret promised. "Not anymore." A year after she first set foot on the ranch, William took her back to that little church. The minister met them looking puzzled. "Mr. Monroe, is everything okay?" "Everything is perfect," William said, smiling at his wife. "We want to renew our vows, but do it right this time." So they stood there again, speaking the same words. But this time, Margaret felt every single one in her soul. This time, she pulled him in for the kiss first. It was a kiss full of joy and certainty. "I choose you," she whispered against his lips. "Today and all my tomorrows, I choose us." "Best deal I ever made," William teased. Margaret just laughed and kissed him again. He was hers, and she was his. That was all that mattered. Riding back, she looked over the ranch and felt a deep sense of pride. This was her home. This was the life she had chosen. And she would keep choosing it every single day, building something real and lasting. Love was not about a storybook start. It was about the daily choice to stay and grow together. Margaret was sold into a marriage of fear. But what she found was something more precious. She found a love built from respect, trust, and the grit to choose each other when no one thought they should. That was worth more than any price her father could have demanded. It was worth more than any loan or piece of land. Margaret Monroe began her journey with no choice at all. But she ended it as a woman who had claimed the only choice that ever truly mattered, the choice to love with her whole heart for the rest of her days.